Hello everyone, this is Samir from Audio Science Review. I'm here with another product review. At the risk of giving you whiplash, a couple days ago I reviewed the Chord Alto, which was over $4,000 headphone amplifier and power amplifier. Today I have a $100 stereo amplifier for you. It's from a company called Douk or Douk Audio. And it's a company we've known mostly for their VU meters. I reviewed that maybe a year or two ago. And we all suggested that the VU meter should also have an amplifier in it, and they've gone and designed one and sent this sample in for testing. So it's a simple amplifier from the front, volume control, and unusually though it has a tone control. And this tone control is only for bass response, so it rolls off the bass, and I'll show you that in the measurements, but the lowest amount is 30 hertz and goes to maximum 200 hertz. Actually, all the way on the left, it clicks and shuts off all filtering, but then you turn it on and you can gradually reduce the bass. And why that's useful is that this changes the output to your main speaker. So if you have a speaker system with a subwoofer, you can roll off the lows here, and then it has an auxiliary output that you then feed to your subwoofer, and this is volume controlled. Some of them have these kinds of outputs, but it's fixed level, which doesn't do you any good. So this is really, really nice and well thought out. The company listened to the ASR forum members on what they wanted and produced this. On top is kind of a cute feature. There's this plexiglass which you can open. It's only held together with this sticky at the bottom, so a little bit hokey, but inside it you have the obligatory sockets for the op amps that you could change, and I highly recommend that you do not change them. And a set of dip switches that actually change this RGB lights that are in here. I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see they're green. You can change them to any color you want, and you know, cute little differentiation for the company, so I don't mind it. I know some people are complaining about it on the forum, but I think it's a good deal. It's rated typical of these TI 3255 parts, Class D amplifier chips. You can power them all the way up to 48 volts. The power supply that comes with it is this 36 volt 5 amp one. I don't recommend that you go to the 48 volt because the only heat dissipation is the IC, the amplifier IC is actually coupled to the bottom of the case, not even the top of the case. It's fairly typical that it's coupled to the bottom, and then the whole case becomes a heat sink. So if you live in a cool place like we do, maybe 48 volts will work if you don't push it all the time. But in general, I suggest you stay with this. But you can always get the 48 volt one and not play it loud. It's up to you. I think it's another $10 or $15 more. So let me put this aside and let's look at the measurements on this thing. So I posted this a couple days ago, so if you want to go read it on audiosciencereview.com, you're welcome to do that. But I'm going to go over all the measurements. Make sure you watch my tutorial on amplifier measurements if you want to know in depth what these measurements do. So I typically start with a test that drives the amplifier with a 1 kilohertz tone. Is this spike over here? Oops. Let me get out of that. Yeah, the spike that you see over here, and drive it at 5 watts. And adjust the gain to around 22, 23 dB typically. And we can see that the 5 watts is shown in here. And the total sum of noise and distortion is about 87 dB or 88 dB or so. If we look down here, so what does that mean? The best is way up here, is 120, and the worst is down to, I don't know, 35 or something. So this falls in this green category, which I call competent. That one is an eye chart. Even this graph may be an eye chart. Go look at it on the forum. But it lands in a very good place in here, beating many, many amplifiers below it. The average SINAT for all amplifiers tested is about 81 dB. And this is at 87, 88 dB, which means that it beats more than half the amplifiers I've ever tested. On the frequency response, very good job has been done in that these Class D amplifiers around this chip, you can build them around 2 ways. All Class Ds have these pulses that they generate, and you got to get rid of all the high frequency energy in those pulses before you output this stuff to the speaker. And so that's done with a filter, not very different from the filter that you have in a crossover of a speaker. And those filters then interact with the speaker and can change the frequency response of the speaker. But there's a method where the feedback for the amplifier can be tapped outside of the filter. That means incorporate that and compare that to the input, and the amplifier itself can correct for that. That's called PFFB, post-filter feedback mechanism. And I was very surprised that at $100, this amplifier supports that. Excuse me. Most of the cheap amplifiers that we have in this price category don't have PFFB in them. And you can tell that it has that because when you look in here, I've measured it with an 8 ohm load and a 4 ohm load. And the gap between these two ideally would be non-existent. In a class A, B, that would land on top of each other. And the gap here is very small. Without that, usually you get a large overshoot over here. So not perfect implementation. You can do a little bit better than this, but still darn good. The low frequency response goes all the way down to 10 hertz and still flat, which is nice. And then I went ahead and turned on the high pass filter, and I set the dial just to the middle arbitrarily. And you can see that it's got a very steep, nice filter that should keep all the low frequency bass response that goes into the speaker that you don't want, and then you can feed this stuff to a sub. So very nice as far as this is concerned. The other thing that's very nice is channel separation. Usually when I test most average amplifiers, the line sort of looks like this. It's 10 or 20 dB worse. And this little amplifier, budget amplifier, comes very close to this reference multi-$1,000 amplifier. So very, very good job done. A little bit of bad news in that as frequencies get higher, the distortion rises and fairly rapidly. So it's not perfect. There's a bit of a compromise in here. And you can see the same thing if I just take a 19 and 20 kilohertz tones and feed it to it. The distortion spikes are quite high, minus 60 dB, which is about only 10 bits. Fortunately, this doesn't happen in music. Music doesn't have this kind of a full amplitude in here. So in practice, it's not too bad, but it's not perfect, but perfect for the price. The noise performance is very, very good for the class. Basically, clears 16-bit CD quality at just 5 watts. So that's not much power. When you crank it up, then it goes up to almost 18 dB it clears. So as far as just noise floor, if you're playing it near maximum power, it doesn't contribute any more than the music itself would be doing that. So here's a power sweep. We can see that noise floor is low. Distortion starts to set in a little early. I expect this to keep going down and then go up. But at any rate, we get about 59 watts in this type of measurements, which is not very accurate as far as power. I'll show you a more accurate one in a second. So that's with 4 ohm. With 8 ohm, we naturally get less power. If you want more power with 8 ohm, then get the 48 volt. But know that 95% of the speakers I test, regardless of what the manufacturers tell you, have a lowest minimum impedance of 3.5 to 4 ohm. So don't go by this 8 ohm stuff that the manufacturers tell you. Usually it's incorrect. So this is the power you're likely going to get. This is a more accurate test in that I tell the analyzer to keep playing with the maximum output until distortion reaches 1%. And now we see that it gets about 75 watts. This is a sort of a continuous test. This is a burst test, which is a sine wave that sort of goes up and goes back down. And we see that it generates the same amount of power. That's because the power supply in these things is regulated, outputs the same amount, whether it's for short term or long term. So you don't gain anything. This is very typical of Class D amplifiers. Class A, B with big power supplies will have some amount of headroom. I've added a new test I call the 40 hertz test. The above, this is at 1 kilohertz, but most of the energy is down in bass. And we see that there's very little power drop. It went from 74 watts down to 71 watts or so. So not much loss. And you can see that better when I run this, what I call FTC-like test, where I try to determine the maximum power with 1% distortion at 10 different power points. And we can see that the power is very much within the same envelope. I then zoom it in and you can see these 10 points that is measured. So at the low of about 68 watts and goes as high as 82 watts and then it comes back down. So quite good. Some amplifiers will peak and their power rating is much more varied than this one is. I then run a test where I change the frequency from 15 kilohertz down to 20 hertz. An ideal amplifier would have these lines just coming down and going up. These are not ideal amplifiers, and they're not the lowest noise and distortion products, but they're still quite good and beat many amplifiers. We can see that once you get down to about 1 kilohertz or so, the noise and distortion is quite low in here. But above 1 kilohertz, you get this nonlinear increase in distortion, and things balloon up. This is very typical of this class of amplifier, although the actual shape varies between implementations. This is a brutal test for a desktop little amplifier at $100, but I have a $25,000 audiograph reactive load generator where I can not only simulate constant resistive loads of 2, 4, and 8 ohm, but I can also say vary the phase angle as if it were a sort of a real speaker. And I can go the phase angle negative, I can go phase angle positive, and I can do that at different impedances. So here's 8 ohm, the middle is no phase shift, and then, one direction or the other direction. And doing that makes this harder for the amplifier because the voltage and current are no longer in sync. And so at 8 ohm, these are the voltages, and I'll show you in a second the watts would make more sense. An ideal amplifier would not care how you change this. The load, of course, is not an ideal amplifier, so you get a little bit of variations in here. But interestingly enough, even at 2 ohm, it's happy to drive a 2 ohm load, which is amazing. There are big burly amplifiers that can't do 2 ohm, and this guy doesn't have any trouble. And if I convert that to watts, so you better understand. So we get about 40, 45 watts at 8 ohm, and then 98 watts down to 81 watts or 80 watts at 4 ohm. And then at 2 ohm, it actually produces 171 watts at the extreme, going down to 123 watts. So it's a pretty beefy amplifier. Now, these are momentary power measurements, less than a second, so it's not something that you can produce continuously day in, day out. But it's an amazing amount of power, and this is just one channel that is outputting this much, so 2 channels will put out even more. So quite powerful for a little amplifier. This is power on stability. I turn on the amp, let it warm up, and you can see that it's almost instantly stable and doesn't benefit from being left on, so I would turn it on when you need it and turn it back off. I then test to see if there's an on-off pop, and on this one, I didn't realize that the volume control actually turns it on and off. So instead, I unplugged the AC cable, which is a little bit of a more extreme case on this thing because the power supply also then fluctuates. And both on and off exceeds my 1 millivolt threshold. So I'd say it's likely, depending on sensitivity of your speaker, that you get a popping noise both when you turn it on and when you turn it off on this thing. A little bit that is not in here is listening test. I hooked it up to my Infinity speakers reviews. They're tower speakers, really budget tower speakers, but very well designed and sound quite good. And I drove it with the Douk amp, and I was surprised the amount of power that it has. And this speaker is close to the wall right now, and because of that, it's somewhat boomy in the bass, and it was very nice to have that high-pass filter in the amplifier. But I just cranked it up till the boominess went away, and boy, it was a lot more pleasant. And then I cranked it up, it got quite loud driving the speaker, and I'm driving only one speaker, so you drive 2 speakers. It'll be sufficient for 80-90% of people who want a music system. This little amp would be more than enough, and it's not some compromise budget amplifier. So as far as I'm concerned, $100 stereo amplifier, price of a couple going to McDonald's 3 times, basically. You can have an amplifier and get enjoyment out of it. And, it's lightweight, it's small, you can hide it anywhere. No, it doesn't have remote control, so you got to put it on your desk, or you have to have a source that has a remote control. And it solves your amplification problem and potentially generates over 100 watts of power. 10 or 20 years ago, you'd have to pay $1,000 or more, and you still wouldn't get as low noise and distortion as this little amp can produce. So definitely recommend it. Take a look. The price, because of the tariffs going into effect, maybe it'll go up $10 or $20. I don't know. But as of this review, when I checked, it was still $100. Okay, for more information, just go and read the text review. Okay, see you in a future video. Bye-bye.